Somewhere, tens of thousands of years ago, a human being died. And for the first time in the history of life on Earth, the ones who were left behind did something no creature had ever truly done before. They did not walk away. They did not simply leave the body where it fell, as every other animal does. Instead, they stayed. They gathered. They laid the body down with care, perhaps folded the arms, perhaps placed something beside it. And in that single, quiet act, something entirely new came into the world. Because to bury your dead is to say something extraordinary. It is to say, this one mattered. This one is not just meat and bone. This loss means something, and it is worth marking. That moment may be one of the truest births of what we call humanity. Not the first tool, not the first fire, the first time we refuse to let death be the end of the story. This is what our ancestors did with their dead, and what it reveals about the birth of the human soul. To feel how strange and new this was, look at the rest of the living world. In nature, death is abandonment. When an animal dies, the others move on. A herd walks away from a fallen member. Even a grieving elephant or a mourning ape, for all their evident feeling, ultimately leaves the body behind to the earth and the scavengers. That is simply how life works. The dead are left where they fall. And for a very long time, this was true of our ancestors too. For most of our deep history, there is no sign of anything else. Death came, and the living moved on, as every animal must. But then, slowly, something changed in us. Somewhere along the way, a group of early humans looked at one of their own who had died and could not simply leave. Something in them refused it. Some new feeling, some new understanding, made walking away impossible. And so they did the unthinkable, the unnatural, the profoundly human thing. They cared for the body of someone who could no longer do anything for them in return. Think about what that means. To care for the dead is, in pure survival terms, pointless. The dead cannot hunt, or help, or repay you. An animal ruled only by survival would never waste effort on a body. So the moment our ancestors began to tend their dead, it is a sign that something beyond raw survival had awakened in them. Love, perhaps. Grief. Memory. The sense that a person is more than a body. So, what does the evidence actually show? When did we start? Deep in the human story, we begin to find something remarkable in the ground. Bodies that were not simply left, but deliberately placed. Laid carefully into a hollow in the earth. Positioned, sometimes curled gently, as if in sleep. Arranged with a care that no accident and no scavenger could ever produce. These are the first graves, and they are unmistakably deliberate. In some of the most famous of these ancient resting places, we find hints of even more. Traces of red ochre, a rich earth pigment, sprinkled over or around the body. The color of blood, of life, of the earth itself. Why did they use it? We cannot be certain. But to go to the trouble of coloring a grave is not the act of a creature that sees only meat and bone. It is the act of a mind reaching for meaning. And here is what moves me most about these ancient graves. The care in them is unmistakable. A body positioned with tenderness. A resting place chosen and returned to. In some places, the same spot used again and again, generation after generation. A place that belonged to the dead. These were not disposals, they were farewells. Across tens of thousands of years, through nothing but the arrangement of bones in the earth, we can still feel it. Someone loved this person. and did not want to let them go without ceremony. And then there is the detail that changes everything, the one that opens a window straight into the ancient mind. In many of these graves, the dead were not laid down alone. Beside them, our ancestors placed things, tools, beads and ornaments, sometimes food, objects of value. In a world where nothing of value was easy to make or find, deliberately given up and buried with the dead. Stop and think about how strange and how profound that is. Why would you bury a good tool, something precious, something the living could still use, with a person who can no longer hold it? There is really only one kind of answer, because you believe on some level that they still might need it, that the story does not end at the grave, that the person is going somewhere or becoming something and should not go empty-handed. These grave goods may be the oldest evidence we have of one of the most powerful ideas in all of human history, that death is not the end. The first faint hint of a belief in an afterlife, in spirits, in a journey, in something beyond the body lying in the earth. We cannot know exactly what they believed, but we can see in the objects they buried that they believed something. And that is a staggering thing to glimpse across so many thousands of years, the moment our ancestors began to hope, to imagine that love and life might reach beyond death itself. Almost every religion, every idea of a soul, every notion of heaven, or the ancestors that humans have ever held, all of it has its faint first roots here, in a handful of objects laid beside the dead. And here is something that makes this story even deeper, even more humbling. We were not the only humankind who did this. For a long time, we imagined our close cousins, the Neanderthals, as brutish and simple, creatures without inner life. But the ground tells a different story, because the Neanderthals too buried their dead. We have found their resting places, bodies deliberately laid in the earth, positioned with care, tens of thousands of years ago. In some, there are signs that the dead were tended, even cared for in old age or injury, long before death, by a group that did not abandon its weak. And in death, they were not abandoned either. There is one Neanderthal resting place, famous among scientists, where an old man who had lived with severe injuries, who could only have survived because others helped him for years, was laid to rest in a way that suggests he was mourned. Whatever the exact truth of every case, the pattern is clear. Grief and the care of the dead was not ours alone. This tells us something beautiful. The impulse to honor the dead, to refuse to simply walk away, runs deeper than our own species. It was shared by other kinds of humans who lived and loved and mourned alongside us. Death rituals may be one of the oldest and most fundamental things about being human, so old that it predates humanity as we know it. We are not the only ones who ever stood at a grave, but this raises a harder question, one underneath all of it. Why do we grieve at all? Grief is, in a way, a strange thing for evolution to build. It is painful. It is draining. It can stop a person in their tracks for days, weeks, longer, in a world where survival never paused. So why would nature give us something that hurts so much and helps so little? The answer is that grief is the price of love, and love, deep, lasting bonds between people, was one of the most powerful survival tools our species ever had. Humans survive by belonging. We live in groups bound together by fierce attachments to our children, our partners, our parents, our closest companions. Those bonds are what make us protect each other, share food, raise the helpless young through their long childhoods, care for the injured. A creature that forms deep bonds is a creature that survives. But every deep bond carries a shadow. If you love someone enough to protect them at the cost of your own life, then losing them will tear something in you. Grief is simply what that love feels like when the person is gone. You cannot have one without the other. The very depth of feeling that binds us together in life is the same depth that breaks us in death. So when our ancestors stood over a grave, wounded by loss, they were paying the price of the very thing that made them human, their capacity to love one another completely. Grief is not a flaw in us. It is the proof of how deeply we are capable of belonging. And that first refusal to walk away has never left us. It runs unbroken all the way to you. Every funeral ever held, every grave marked with a stone, every candle lit for someone gone, every photograph kept on a shelf, every anniversary quietly remembered, all of it descends from that first ancient moment when human beings laid one of their own into the earth with care and could not bear to let them simply vanish. We still do exactly what they did. We still gather around the dead. We still mark the place. We still, in 1,000 different ways across every culture on earth, say the same thing they said with red ochre and buried tools. This one mattered. This one is not forgotten. The story does not end here. It is one of the most universal things about our species. There is no human culture, anywhere, that does not care for its dead in some way. It is as human as language, as fire, as love itself. And it began not with grand temples or holy books, but with a handful of grieving people, long ago, who looked at someone they had lost and chose to stay. That choice, to honor, to remember, to refuse to let death have the final word, may be one of the deepest and most beautiful things our kind has ever done. It is where the human heart first showed itself in the earth. So the next time you stand at a grave, or light a candle, or simply hold the memory of someone you have lost, know that you are doing one of the oldest human things there is. You are joining a line that stretches back tens of thousands of years to the first people who refused to walk away, who looked at death and answered it not with indifference, but with love and ceremony and hope, who buried their dead with care, and in doing so, quietly declared that a human life is worth remembering. That is where so much of what makes us human began, in grief, and in the refusal to let it be the end. This is the story of how we first faced death and chose to remember. Sit down at the oldest campfire on earth, beside the ones who came before, and follow along. This is Emberkind.